Hi, I'm Alex Howard, and welcome to this week's episode of In Therapy, where we follow real-life people on their therapeutic journeys. In this week's episode, we're catching up with David. I think this week's episode is a really good example of what the reality of therapeutic work is often like. We have to chip away at the same issue using different tools and different perspectives to really get the transformation and change that we seek. Rarely is therapy these glamorized moments of I say or someone says a few words of wisdom and the whole thing changes and transforms. Often we need to be patient, to be diligent, to be persistent, to gradually get those shifts which we're looking for. We're also still trying out the new format here on In Therapy, where we're sharing the full unedited session. So I'd love to hear in the comments what you think of the new format. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, click the bell icon to be notified as new episodes are released, and follow my Instagram at Alex Howard Therapy for daily inspiration and support. This week, we are catching up with David, who's been making some real positive changes whilst in therapy. In our last session, David opened up about his vulnerabilities around getting into a relationship due to past experiences. I challenged David to change the narrative he tells himself by taking action outside the therapy room by starting an online dating profile.
David, it's great to see you. It's been a while since I last saw you. Last time we sat here, I think I set you a piece of homework about setting up your online dating profile. And, we don't have to start there. I'd like to get there at some point, but I'm just wondering, how have things been and what's been happening?
It hasn't gone incredibly well, but there's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, I sort of moved house.
Yeah, tell me about that, because obviously I remember the techno-loving former housemates was a source of problem.
Yeah.
So that's great because in a sense, I remember we had a session back in the spring where I was talking, I think you were in Scotland, and I was saying about can we take the momentum from the new job into dealing with it. So it sounds like you've done that, which is great.
Yeah. So I mean, it was I sort of moved at the end of August, and it all happened sort of fairly quickly in the end. And I mean, obviously depression and stuff, you're a bit up and down anyway, but it's, it immediately was something of a weight off my mind, and obviously it was something that you'd spoken about and I'd spoken about with other people, and everyone was sort of like, for the sake of your own health, you should move, and there is a part of me just wishes I had done it sort of, back around sort of January or February, when you were all telling me this, because it's, it has been a lot easier, and almost, I mean, I'm not fucking teetotal or anything like that, far from it, but I would say almost immediately, my sort of modelling drinking sort of tapered off and, went right down.
That's really interesting.
And it wasn't a case of, I'm not going to drink, it was just a case of, I just didn't drink, it was like I never even thought of having a drink. So
I mean, it's so interesting. In a sense, it felt like you were self-medicating your own frustration and your own sense of stuckness, in a sense.
I just haven't been drinking as much. It's been a lot easier, a lot lighter.
And you're living by yourself, or
yeah.
How is that?
It's good. I mean, I lived by myself before, and it, but yeah, it's nice after, I mean, there was a sort of year there where I was sharing with someone who was bonkers, but it's just a lot easier and a lot, just a lot freer and just a lot sort of more relaxed and comfortable, and not having to listen to techno 18 hours a day is just
I can't imagine why your quality of life improved.
It's just I mean, who would have thunk? So that's been good.
And you mentioned a sort of throwaway comment that the friend's cat that's soon to be yours. So
My friends have been fostering a cat for about 6-10 months, and obviously where I was before, I couldn't have a cat because my techno-loving flatmate was allergic to everything.
And the cat probably wouldn't appreciate the techno either.
Yeah, probably not. So one of the things that I was looking for, my basic criteria when I was moving was that I wanted a bath and I wanted to get somewhere that was cat friendly. So I specifically only looked at flats where I could have a pet, and then while that was happening, my friends were like, "Oh, our cat's ready to be adopted. We were only fostering them. Why don't you come over and meet them?" Went over and met them, and then they were going away for a fortnight to Canada, so they asked me to cat sit, which was a good experience and horrific as well, because well, he's a bit skittish and he's a rescue cat and he's blind in one eye and all these kind of things. So he got a bit nervous one night and just shat, and I panicked and destroyed their sofa. Which was a wedding present. So
But you and the cat bonded over the experience.
Oh, the cat just totally washed his paws of it. He was just like, "Was that you?" So I had a very, what started out as a very relaxed sort of 2 weeks, in a nice place without any techno music, suddenly became, a very worried week,
right,
where I was running around trying to clean this. And but that's all been resolved. But so I'm adopting their cat, and take delivery of him a week tomorrow, so sort of end of the month.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's really cool. I'm excited for you. I think as we said a few times, and I'm really glad it's come to fruition, having a place that you call home that feels good and feels nurturing, and that means different things to different people, but what feels like the home that you want, I think is really important. I'm really pleased to hear that's come to fruition.
I mean, it's a nice place. It's sort of it's a sort of block of flats, a sort of housing complex, compound, I don't know what you'd call it, but it's right across the road from Black Horse Road Station. And
where is that?
It's just in Walthamstow. It's the stop before Walthamstow Central. And it's Black Horse Road is a very busy road. The station's busy. There's also an overground station. But I went to see it during rush hour and could hear virtually nothing.
Really?
Where the flat is, yeah. So the flat's kind of towards the back of this sort of block of flats. And
it's very up and coming, that area as well, isn't it? It's like it's one of those areas in London where people have moved out a bit because they couldn't perhaps afford,
probably.
But then it's got that kind of more kind of vibrant sort of feel to it in a sense.
Yeah. That's why I'm there. I'm a trendsetter.
What can I say, David? We always need that about you.
So I went there and it was really quiet. I couldn't really hear the road. I couldn't really hear the trains. That was at rush hour. So
right.
So it's nice. It's quiet. Neighbours are sane.
And don't play techno.
So all seem very nice,
How have you been in terms of just your mind and emotions over the last few months? What's been the general sort of trends?
There's been up and down moments, like any time, and I've had my sort of down moments, but I've been able to get through them. Had quite a weird one just over this last 10 days. I was deleting messages off my phone, and because I just didn't have any memory on my phone, and I came across a message from my dad from like 2 years ago, before he got ill, and like a 4-minute message, and I was like, fuck, I don't remember that. And so it took me kind of a couple of days to kind of sort of work up to listening to it, and it was a butt dial.
Was there anything interesting in this butt dial?
Well, that's the thing. It was quite kind of weird and interesting because it was like, obviously, he and my mother had either been somewhere, they'd been on holiday or they'd been to like, visit friends or something, because they were definitely in a taxi.
Right.
And I could hear very muffled, sort of in the background, my mother was on her mobile phone and obviously on the phone to me.
How funny. Okay.
And my father's one of these people who just, he couldn't fucking, he couldn't leave a taxi driver alone, you know.
A backseat driver, you mean? Or?
Well, not so much backseat driver, but I had to chat to them. You know, it was just like, you know, about nothing usually, you know. So like, sort of like, you busy tonight? Yeah, all that kind of stuff. And I can hear him doing that with the taxi driver, so obviously that's much louder. And but he's busy sort of telling the taxi driver essentially my life, you know. And saying, that's my boy on the phone, he's living down in London, you know, and it was this kind of sort of 4-minute, almost like eulogy for me.
Wow.
Which was weird, because it was weirdly, you know, it was that kind of thing where, you know, I had a good relationship with my father, but you don't really talk about feelings too much, even though he was someone who was a bit more vocal about that kind of stuff, but you don't really, and you certainly don't talk about, you know, being proud of someone, or, you know, but it was kind of like, it was just kind of weird listening to it, because it was, you could kind of hear just the pride and emotion in his voice when he was talking.
That's so beautiful. It's like a message from the grave, right?
Yeah, which is also fucking freaky.
Yeah. But it's also, that's a beautiful gift.
Yeah, so it's been, I've been kind of sort of chewing that over for the last sort of few days.
How has it left you feeling? I'm sure a number of different things, but
yeah, I mean, it's like you say, it's there's something quite beautiful about it, and there's something incredibly freaky about it, and it also feels almost like he's eulogising me, you know.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of thing. It's like, wait a minute, did I die?
But there's something also about him saying that to a stranger in a proud way, which is almost more powerful than him saying it to someone that you know, because it's like he doesn't need to say it, like he's just expressing how he feels.
But also, I mean, the thing that struck me about it was it wasn't a sort of overt thing, it was a sort of a kind of matter of fact everyday pride, which was kind of more touching in a way.
Yeah.
Because it was just like, that's my boy, he's in London, you know, he's been doing there a while, you know, and he's got 2 jobs, he's doing this and he's doing this and other thing, and then he was doing a writing thing, and you know, so it was all these, essentially just telling this guy my whole life story, you know, and even down to the fact, you know, about me having strokes and being disabled and stuff and living on my own things. So it was a strange phone call to overhear. Yeah. But not an unpleasant one.
Yeah. Yeah. How has it left you feeling with your dad and the sort of just the processing of that? Because it must be, 18 months now since he passed?
Yeah. It's about
16 months, I guess it would be, is it?
Yeah, it's about sort of 15, 16 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's fine. I mean, you know, it's just one of those things. You know, it's, you know, you still think about them, but it's, you know, other things come along and get in the way. So, you know. I mean, my mum broke her vertebrae in her back, so, you know.
Say that again?
My mum has broke like 8 vertebrae in her back.
She has?
Yeah.
And she okay?
Yeah, she's practically recovered.
Okay. A lot happened in a few months, hasn't it?
Yeah, but it actually happened when I was in Scotland. So it happened sort of like around probably Easter or something.
Oh, that's right. No, we had spoken about this. Yeah.
So noticing those big dates, you know, so like, you know, the first birthdays without him, you know, and then there was the first Christmas without him, and then there was his first birthday without him, you know.
Yeah.
So you sort of pile, and eventually, you know, it's now getting to the second of those sort of things, you know. So it's like it's now been his the first anniversary of his death, the anniversary of his funeral, and it's now back to, my niece's second birthday without him. So it's just becoming life. And in the meantime, my mother's had her health problems. My cousin's had a car accident, which she recovered from. My niece got her exam results, and had a flying lesson. It's just, it's just life.
She had a flying lesson, not you had a flying lesson.
Oh, yeah, she wants to be a pilot. So
wow, that's cool.
Ever since she was about 13, every birthday and Christmas she just gets money and she just puts it away. And so this was her second flying lesson.
Wow, that's cool.
So she just pays for them as and when she can afford them.
Yeah.
But yeah, she wants to be a pilot when she grows up. So it was like, she got her exam results, and then like the next week was her birthday, and on the weekend she went for a flying lesson. But it's just like, it's just life goes on.
Yeah, life keeps moving.
Yeah.
The time before last, I think that I saw you, you'd had a couple of anxiety attacks where things sort of escalated and built up. How's that been?
Again, since I moved, they haven't stopped, but there's been a lot fewer. So,
And when they've happened, have they been as bad as they were? Or have they also been less kind of debilitating?
I think they were as bad as they were, but there's definitely been a lot fewer.
Yeah.
So yeah, and again, I've just used the sort of techniques we discussed and got through them.
Yeah. So let's come back to the homework that I sent you last time, and I really hear that, in a sense, it sounds like what needed to happen between last time and this time's happened. In many ways, you did a far bigger thing than do a dating profile.
Yeah.
You moved house, and I think we have it on tape how many times I was like, you need to move. So
Yeah.
I feel really good with the fact that you've done that, and well done. Where does that leave you now then with, to put the kind of dating piece possibly to the side, how are you feeling about the next 3 to 6 months? Like, what feels like needs to be your focus? Like where do you feel you're at in, kind of in the spirit of life moving on and sort of the next kind of chapters for you? How do you feel about that, and what do you feel that is?
Yeah, I mean, I do want to sort of, I think part of it is I'm just sort of getting my feet under the table in my new flat and my new job and all that kind of stuff, but that's sort of, I'm still, I'm pretty much fine with where I'm living. There's still bits of the new job that I'm learning and sort of,
But that also keeps it interesting as well.
Yeah, but that's an ongoing thing.
I mean, the day that you're not learning anything is probably the day you need to move on, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, I'm getting more and more comfortable with it, and yeah, I'm enjoying it. So yeah, I think the homework project is the next thing on my list. Part of it is I wanted to speak to a few friends, and just because of work commitments on my part and their part and just, it was summer and some people were around, some people were not around. I just haven't managed to really have the helpful conversations I needed to have with people. And in fact, one person I was supposed to speak to last week, and we had to cancel, and I'm seeing her this week. So yeah, I don't, I kind of feel like I need help with it from people.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm doing.
Do you feel clear on who the people are and what the help is that you need?
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple of people I sort of asked, and one person who I was quite surprised by their response.
In what way?
They were just very uncomfortable with it.
With you doing it, or them helping you do it, or?
I think with them helping.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
Yeah. So.
you know what that was about?
They just felt it was too private. So,
okay.
But that was a bit strange and did kind of slightly knock my confidence in that person a little bit for a while.
And how about others that you've spoken to, or it sounds like some that you haven't quite got there with it yet? But.
Yeah. I one person who I met up with, it wasn't really appropriate.
Okay.
Well, no,
there's a story there. David.
No, it doesn't. No, it's nothing like that. Okay. It was just when we met up, they were going through a couple of things.
Okay.
That were quite serious, and they were not in a happy place themselves.
Right, so it wasn't the moment to go. Hey, so
we just had a nice time instead. There's been there was a situation like that.
There's it sounds like there's some clear, in a sense, we can almost roll over the homework, and there's some clear sort of action points that are in there, but. As you're thinking about it, how does it feel to you? Does it feel daunting still, or do you feel a bit more ready or open? Like, I'm really interested just on, as we're just talking about it now, like what comes up.
I mean, it still feels daunting. It feels like it's the next step that I need to take, but it still feels daunting. And one piece of advice I'd got, which was actually from Rachel, your producer,
I wouldn't listen to her advice.
was that I should be my authentic self.
Oh yeah, I wonder where she heard that.
And I was like, I'm not entirely sure who my authentic self is, or if I would even like the bastard if I met him. So so I spent a lot of time trying to think of that.
Right.
And I don't think it's necessarily bad advice. I just need to figure out.
Yeah, it's actually quite good advice.
I just need to figure out who my authentic self is.
Just that small thing.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question on sort of on that track. What's your fear of what would happen? What's your inner critic story of what would happen if you showed up? If you were to know what your authentic self is, and you showed up in your authentic self, because I think for a lot of us, our inner critic has all kinds of judgments and stories and rejections of us. So I'm wondering what that is.
I think partly that's what it is. I'm not sure what it is. And like I say, it's somewhere. It's an aspect of my life I've never been particularly confident in, and for a lot of different reasons. Partly the disability and partly other things, and I just, there is a real sort of fear of not being good enough, of not being, worth it, without sounding like a hair advert. So I think that's...
Yeah, so there's quite a big inner critic piece around, we don't quite know who your authentic self is, but whoever it is probably isn't going to be good enough, isn't going to be likeable. And then it's sort of like, well, where do you go with that, right? Like, because in a sense, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of you is that the friends that you are able to be more relaxed with and more yourself with, you strike me and come across someone who has good friendships and is a good friend and is caring and is respectful. And, that to me is you being your authentic self, because you're not trying to be anything else. You're not putting on a sort of, whatever. And then, but the challenge is the inner critic that has all these stories around, you can't, that's not enough. And if you go dating, or you need to be this or that. And so we get in all this sort of funk, in a sense, of all the ideas and the stories. And then it sounds like you almost become confused and overwhelmed and a sort of like, it just becomes too much in a sense. And yet sort of the secret is the more at ease we are, like the more relaxed we are, the less we're in a sense that what I call the idealized self, this idea of all who we think we should be, we need to be liked, to be loved, to feel safe, whatever all that is, the more kind of amped up we feel, the more stressed we feel, the more we grab onto those masks, the more we try to kind of keep ourselves feeling safe and all those things, that actually the more at ease we are, the easier it is to not go into all of that. So I guess I'm wondering, who is the person your inner critic tells you that you should be when you're dating? So if you're going off and you're, either in your dating profile or you go off and you have some dates, who are you telling yourself that you need to be?
Well, my inner critics tell me not to fucking bother.
And if you were to, like, if you've, let's say, a friend said, right, I'm going to set up on a blind date with this person, I think they're going to be great for you and blah, blah, blah. And you decided, despite your inner critic story about it, you decided to go. What do you think would play out in your mind?
I don't know. I mean, I've very rarely been set up on a blind date, but I have had the occasional one, and most of them have been disastrous. But I usually get a funny story out of it.
I always enjoy your funny stories. But what I'm particularly looking for is why you think they're disastrous. Like, what tends to play out?
Well, and like, well, the last blind date where I got a funny story out of it, where someone actually set me up, I got banned from a Korean restaurant.
Not easily done.
Yeah, it was, I'd been set up with this girl, and it was a day when I was working for the arts company, and it was a Saturday night, and the company who were in rehearsing, their van got stuck on the motorway somewhere between Bristol and here, and so they were delayed, and I sort of contacted this girl and sort of said, look, I'm going to be a little bit late, because we were supposed to meet at 7, and I was like, I'm going to be a little bit late. Oh, that's fine, I was like, gave her the option of cancelling and doing it another night. No, fine, And then it just dragged on, so, I thought I was going to be 10, 20 minutes late, and then it was, but I kept her updated the whole time, and so she was in a pub, and and by the time I got there, it was probably about an hour and a half late, which is not good. But I had told her that I was,
Yeah, you had solid justification of why you were late. Yeah,
and she was very nice and a little bit sort of merry, because she'd been in a pub on her own for an hour and a half.
Just keep yourself entertained while she was waiting.
And but we had a nice chat, and we were getting on well, and and it got I was drinking a lot to try and catch up with her.
We'll come back to that in a minute, David.
Yeah.
Not always the best strategy.
Well, you say that, but And then I was like, well, we should go and get something to eat. Are you hungry? Yeah, let's get something to eat. And so this time it was about 9:30, and as soon as we left the pub, she just de-evolved.
Meaning?
Well, she just, it was like, do you ever remember, probably when you were a kid, there was an advert on the telly for soft mints, with like Mr. Soft, was this kind of weird cushion guy that walked around.
Not immediately coming to mind.
or like the Energizer Bunny.
Yeah, I remember the Energizer Bunny, yeah.
She was like the Energizer Bunny, she just immediately went, couldn't bite her finger as soon as the sort of air outside hit her. But she was, I was sort of having to help her up, but it was fine. And we just went to this Korean restaurant across the road just next to Holborn Station, and it's like down a flight of stairs, and so we went to this restaurant, and she kind of recovered a little bit, and we had another drink, and we were ordering food and stuff like that, and she was talking away, and then she just kind of went, oh, and just this strange look crossed her face, and I went, oh, and she went, oh, and then just yacked on the table. It was like an 8-pinter.
Oh right, yeah.
Just like threw up, and it was like something out of The Exorcist. It was literally like, maybe I should make sure someone hasn't shoved the hose up her arse, because it's just coming out like that. And but it was a Korean restaurant.
Understandably, didn't invite you back.
No, they have a hot plate in the middle of the table. So the vomit hit the hot plate and started cooking. And the smell just went throughout the restaurant, and like people at other tables started being sick. It was like
I'm not sure it's going to make the episode, but it's a great story, David.
It was like a Mexican wave of vomit through the restaurant. And, and this girl burst into tears because she was incredibly embarrassed. And
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and so I kind of managed to get her out of the restaurant and was getting her a taxi and stuff. So it gets her up, and as we were leaving, the kind of maitre d', who's just this very cool, laconic Korean guy, just went, "Never come back." And sort of got her outside and got her in a cab, and she actually kissed me, and it wasn't the worst kiss I've ever had. It was a little bit funky, but but yeah, never heard from her again.
Yeah, I can imagine she didn't want to relive that night.
The friends who set us up never heard from her again.
Yeah.
She didn't attend their wedding. Things like that.
I mean,
so yeah.
There's lots of ways I can respond to the story for comedy's sake. I mean, it's a great story, David. However,
I have been back to that restaurant once though, and the guy remembered me and said, "I told you never to come back here."
It was more like probably her that wasn't welcome back. But what's interesting is, I mean, there's lots of ways we go right now. But what I think is particularly interesting is alcohol and first dates is probably not a good move.
Yeah.
And in some ways, you hadn't set the precedent on the date, but it's, in a sense, it's trying to set things up in a way that you're giving it the best chance.
Yeah.
And no one is their authentic self after a bottle of wine. I mean, maybe they're a different version of their authentic self. Sometimes they're more authentic self.
Yeah, exactly.
But the point I'm trying to make is that, in a sense, you want to meet from a place of truth and honesty and authenticity. It's one thing to go out and have a sort of racy evening or something. But it's another thing to actually go, do we actually have? Are we interested in each other? Do we actually enjoy each other's company? Is there actually some chemistry that's happening here? And I think that it's often what happens is, if we're nervous and we're dating, as we know, a strategy that you use when you don't feel good in yourself is alcohol. And it doesn't, and historically for you, it's not brought out the best of you. And although in that incident, actually, I think you were probably the good guy in the story. It's hard not to be the good guy in that story.
Well, the thing is, I don't think she was the bad guy in the story either. I think, it's just...
It was unfortunate.
Yeah.
What else, reflecting on some other dates that you had, what else do you think you can learn? Like, if you were to mine the learnings and the insights from your previous dating life to give yourself the best opportunity going forwards, what would you share as being those lessons?
I don't know. I should probably take notes occasionally. I've never really I've probably, when I've been on dates, I've probably never thought about it too much. I've probably been aware every so often of feeling like I'm trying too hard. And, and I try not to, but yeah, I just...
So when you're trying too hard, what are some of the signs of that?
Yeah, just, probably pretending to like musicals.
It's not the room to say that in, David. This is quite a strong fan base of musicals in this room, just so you know.
Yeah.
I mean, Gemma nearly got the sack on the first day when we discovered she didn't like musicals. But the point more being that it's an example of not being authentic, right?
Yeah.
Of in a sense, pretending you have interest.
Probably try to mirror people's views and interests. Because also, there's times though when you can be a little bit maybe to your authentic self.
There's a balance, right? Yeah, it's that kind of balance of social appropriateness, that it's not, what I'm not encouraging is if you're in a bad, grumpy mood, going, well, I'm just going to be shitty because I'm being authentic because I feel that isn't what I mean.
Yeah. That's not something I would do anyway, really.
Right.
But no, just just be, like, I mean, again, probably the wrong room, but just because someone's maybe sort of like a psycho anti-vaxxer, you don't have to tell them during the date.
Say that again.
Maybe just because someone's a psycho anti-vaxxer, you don't have to tell them during the date, whereas I probably would.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, I did go on a date once with a woman who very obviously hero worship Dominic Cummings, and I just was like, the fuck is up with you? Which is not a good way to talk during a date.
Well, it's that I think it's one thing to walk away going, I don't think we're a match because we're just too different. We've got different worldviews. But it's another thing of using your brashness as a way of covering up your awkwardness.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like, I think one of the things that you could probably fall into, and it's quite a Scottish trait more broadly, of covering up vulnerabilities by being a bit punchy in a sense.
I'm probably too sarcastic at times.
Right.
But that's every walk of life, really.
Say that again.
But that's probably every aspect of my life.
Yeah, and it's like what we're not saying, is that what we're not saying is when it comes to dating that you start being, I'm not going to be sarcastic, I'm not going to say that I need to be this sort of, I'm not trying to encourage you to be too polished.
Yeah.
It's just not using ways of being to cover up insecurity, which actually make it go more in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
It's like the version of you that I want to see showing up in your dating life is the version that you are with us, the version that you are with your good friends and people that you just feel able to be yourself with, in a sense. That there's, the more relaxed you are, the more you are yourself, because ultimately that's the person that if it becomes a long-term relationship, that's the person they're going to be in a relationship with anyway. So the sooner you show that person, the better. How about the actual process of putting up the dating profile and sort of tweaking that, and how do you feel about that piece?
Well, as I say, because I haven't really spoken to the people I want to speak to and get their help, I haven't really done too much other than be facetious so far. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And do you recognise that facetiousness is, in a sense, a form of defence?
Yeah. But yeah, so it's, everybody wants to, have a partner in crime until you ask them to meet up, until you ask them to meet up and help you move a body. So I've just kind of left it at that, So, but to be clear, you are clear of who the people are that are going to help you, and you have a plan in place? Yes.
Yeah, and you feel confident they are the right people to help you with that?
Yes.
What's the timeline on that?
Well, I'm meeting one on Wednesday.
Okay. It really strikes me that this next chapter for you is a chapter that's also about just taking some risks, right? It's like, and I think you've done the change in job, you've done the change in home. Like, they alone have been quite big and brave steps. That this is like the next one that, and in a sense, we're building on the momentum of the things that you've done so far. Mm-hmm. And there's something about this next chapter just being willing to get it wrong. Like, as much as we're talking about how to get it right, there's also something about just going, you know what, almost my challenge to you is, can you go on, a date a week for 4 or 5 weeks, just without it having to go well, although of course you do the best that you can with it. But there's something about going from not dating to dating is like a really big leap. But getting to the point that you're just in the habit of going on some dates, then one just naturally becomes more relaxed and more normalized to that process. Mm-hmm. And then it's almost like there's an element of it being a sort of numbers game, that if you get a good enough quality of person you're going on dates with, and you go on enough dates, in time you're statistically highly likely to meet someone that you have something which is a bit more kind of medium to long term with. Mm-hmm. But you've got to put yourself out there, and you've got to kind of have those numbers in your favor, and that piece takes courage. You know, it's not just it takes courage. It also, what often gets in the way of it, it's not so much people lack courage, it's that people have various stories and ideas, that excuses that sort of get in the way. And yes, courage would sort of break through that. But it's also, we just sort of buy our own stories around it. Like, oh, I don't really have time, or you know, we're sort of in a pandemic, or I don't know who my authentic self is anyway. So I'm wondering what those stories, or to put it in more direct language, what those excuses might be that would get in the way over the coming few months, do you think? Like, how would you talk yourself out of it? And how might you be sat here next time with me justifying the fact that you hadn't moved forward?
Oh, I think all those things you just mentioned. But I also do think, you know, the idea of, you know, what you said about, you know, being okay with getting it wrong. That's something that weirdly just terrifies me. You know.
What do you fear? What if you were to kind of run that through in your mind, and you getting it wrong? What about that feels terrifying?
It just feels scary, I guess, and I think it's, you know, it's possibly just a fear of rejection, maybe. But yeah, it just, you know, that idea of, yeah, you go out and on a date and it's, yeah, if something happens, if it doesn't, it's like, yeah, that's kind of alien, you know. So, I mean, and rationally, you know, I see exactly where you're coming from, and you're right. I just probably have a hard time grappling with that idea.
I think it's interesting in life sometimes where rationally, like, we're having a conversation on a kind of rational level that completely makes sense, and I sort of know I'm right, you know I'm right, and on a rational level, it's like, it's kind of obvious. I'm not saying anything which is rocket science, or one needs to have many degrees in psychology to be able to say it. It's sort of kind of common sense in a way. But there's often what gets in the way of us in life is not what's rational, right? It's the stuff that comes up, and it's part of it, I think, as well, is having a big enough reason to do it, right? That, in a sense, you know, you made I thought, an interesting point earlier when you said that, you know, I'd mentioned and friends have mentioned about moving, and you now wish you'd done it back in January.
Yeah.
Because it's like, now you've done it, you realise how much better your life is having done it. But back in January, it's like, it was shit, but it wasn't so shit that you like had no choice but to fix it. But now you fixed it. It's like, oh my God, I wish I could have done this like 9 months ago. And I sort of feel like it's the same thing possibly here, that it's having acted on it and having got yourself out there, whether or not you're in a relationship or not at that point, I still think you'll feel better by the fact that you've got movement and momentum, that you probably look back at this point and go, oh my God, I wish I'd done it sooner. The problem is that you're sort of comfortably uncomfortable. And what I say differently, you're at ease with being slightly miserable and annoyed and frustrated that you're not in a relationship, and you've normalized to that feeling state, you know, and you've normalized to a feeling state that actually, when you're out of it, would be a real relief, but you've just sort of got used to it being that way, you know. So in some ways, it's not, I'm sort of kind of rethinking my own perspective slightly here, it's not so much courage that you need to get through it, because I think, you know, you've got plenty of courage. I think what it is it's almost the will to act, like the sort of the inner drive to sort of go, right, I'm just, despite the fact that I'm normalized to how I am and I've got used to it, actually I can see it could be better, and I'm gonna do something. And I wonder what would help fuel you to do that, do you think?
I don't really know, and that's part of the reason why I want to speak to some friends about it. You know, and you know, it's just not something I really feel comfortable with. But
do you have a sense of what specifically you don't feel comfortable with?
Not really. It's something I've just never been confident with. It's just an aspect of my life I'm not really that confident with. So yeah, but it's I kind of see where you're coming from, but sort of normalising that, and there's other things that I've done recently where it's like, I mean, I've had a whole sort of dispute with my former landlord over the return of the deposit for the flat, and normally that would have really sort of freaked me out or wound me up or made me frustrated or tense or anxious or something like that. And I'm just kind of like, fuck it. On the one hand I'm thinking to myself, well, it's just money, but on the other hand I'm thinking to myself, my money, you're not getting it, and it's that kind of thing where it's like, I'm not going to wind myself up about it, and if I lose it, I'll lose it, but it's sort of like, yeah, I'm not going to sort of let you get away with this behaviour. Yeah. But by the same token, normally I'd be really wound up about it and I'd be really tense and well, I'm not. I'm just sort of like, and so I think
you don't want to pay twice, right? You already might be paying with the money. You also want to pay with a load of misery on top of it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's sort of like, and I definitely know that this time last year that I would have kind of spiraled out of control.
So what do you think's helped it be different this time?
I don't know. I think I'm first of all obviously in a better place, and I've got better coping strategies and stuff. And I think I'm just more, I think I'm just happier. So, and it's sort of like, well, it's money, but I'm okay for money at the moment. And so but I know that if this had been a year ago or even maybe sort of 6-7 months ago, I definitely would have been reacting very differently. And I'm seeing that similar things happening in other ways, in other places, in other situations, work situations where whether or not I showed it on the surface, it might have wound me up, and now it's just like I'm fine.
It's great it's great to hear that. I also think it, in a sense, that also shows that something, things are changing and shifting, and it's not just rationally like that you're working hard to be different in those moments, that something is just different the place you're coming from, which I think is also, in the context of dating, gives us some
well, it gives us some hope.
Right, exactly. It's like, because it's one thing.
I just don't know how to get to that place with that.
Yeah, but it's like, it's one thing to go into a situation and like you're using all the strategies and tools you've got and you're able to manage it better because you've got better coping strategies. And that's part of it, and that is part of what may need to happen with the dating side. But there's also just, you're in a different place. And so when you're in a different place, things just land and hit you differently. And it's almost like the more confident and the more assured you are being yourself, also the more able you are to just sort of rock up and not in like an overcompensatory kind of arrogant kind of way, or in a reactive way, just like, I'm just going to be myself and have a nice time. And if I have a nice time, I probably want to see them again. And if I don't, I don't. But there's not like this big burden, this big pressure. And I think that's also where playing it as a numbers game is also helpful, because it's not like all this pressure on this one day. It's like, well, each one is an opportunity to meet someone and see if you enjoy their company and if they enjoy your company. And it's like, you need to do that enough times to raise the odds that you meet someone that you want to spend time with. But there is something about, I hope it's helpful to name the resistance and the sort of slight awkwardness and the sense that it might in moments feel easier to stay in the current circumstance that you're normalized to. And I hope it's helpful just even like naming that and us talking about that maybe loosens the grip of that a little bit, because it's almost like you find yourself, let's say in a few weeks time, and you're like, I'm seeing Alex, on that day, and I said I was going to do this and I haven't done it. Oh, actually, why haven't I done it? Oh, well, I've been telling myself that this and that. Oh, but we sort of talked about that I might do that.
Yeah.
and go, actually, I can see that I'm running this pattern, and that awareness gives you the chance to go, actually, do you know what? I'm actually just going to get on and do this right now. So you sort of see through it, therefore you don't get caught in it.
Yeah.
I also want to say something actually about rejection, because I think there's something that often, I think for a lot of us, I certainly remember it was something that I struggled with a lot, and I think a lot of people do, the fear of being rejected, that you go out and you like someone and they don't like you, for example. And a lot of the, what's the words, sort of reluctance or apathy, let's say, towards dating is really protecting ourselves from that feeling of being rejected. But the interesting thing is, in that process, by not putting yourself out there, you're already rejected because you've rejected yourself. Like you've projected onto that imaginary person, they're going to reject me, so I'm not going to put myself out there. So by not putting yourself out there, you're already rejected. The strange thing is, one puts themselves out there and actually gets rejected. Often it's less painful than the rejecting of yourself, because it's like, oh, well, it happened and I'm sort of still here, and actually it's not as bad as I feared it was going to be. I'm going to go again, in a sense. Whereas if you're just rejecting yourself and you're not putting yourself out there, you never get a chance to have that experience. I guess, to put it another way, it's almost a good thing to put yourself out there, get rejected, and realize that you survive, and it's not as bad as you fear. That gives more confidence to put yourself out there more. I don't know if that makes a certain amount of sense.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to ask, or anything else be helpful for us to talk about briefly between now and next time? Like, I think your homework's clear. I think you're clear what your homework is. Yeah. How do you feel about just putting yourself out there and, in a sense, moving forward with that?
I was just going to ask where you get your shirts.
John Lewis.
No, I mean, there's nothing I can really think of at the moment. I think, I think I need to get some advice on constructing an honest profile. I think that's the first big step I need to do, and I would have done it already, except that it's just been quite a busy time. And
I hear that. And if you don't feel you get the advice you want from friends, like, actually, joking aside, I'm sure Rachel would be happy to come and help you do it. She actually probably got to know you quite well in this process. And I think it's sometimes just having someone that's, not us, that knows us a bit, that can sort of help bring that out. That's I'm sort of pimping her out for the role, but I don't think she's going to say no.
You're just digging a bigger hole.
You sent me down a rope to get me out.
Yeah.
Any final questions for today?
No.
Okay, good. Well, it's been really nice to see you. It's been a while.
Nice to see you.
We'll aim to get something in a bit sooner for next time.
Cool.
Thanks, David.
I hope you found this week's episode helpful. For those of you that have been following David's story, you'll see that this issue around relationships and putting himself out there is one we've been coming back to a few times. I think that's, as I said in the intro, a really good example of the reality of making challenging changes in our lives. They take discipline, they take determination, they take a willingness to be consistent with and show up to the process. And sometimes we chip away at something many times, and then one day we tap it gently and the whole thing opens up. But it's not that final tap, it's all the chipping away along the way, which has really allowed things to open up and be ready to change. For those of you that are interested in finding out more about the therapeutic coaching model, we're currently taking applications for the 2022 Therapeutic Coaching Practitioner Training. If you'd love to hear a little bit about why I love being a therapist, why doing this job is such an enormous privilege, you can see in the description a video where I talk a little bit about why I love this job. You can also find details on a free 1-hour webinar that really explores the process, the journey that you can go on to train to become a therapeutic coach. Next week, we're going to be catching up with Beverly. Once again, if you're enjoying this new format, if you have any feedback, feel free to comment in the comments below. I look forward to seeing you next week.